Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today to discuss elevating education with AI, practical strategies for nurse educators. My name is Courtney McNulty, and I am the Content Solutions Manager with Unbound Medicine. Today, we have two fantastic panelists with us to hold this conversation, and I will allow them to get started and introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Janeen Berndt, and I am the Senior Director of Curriculum and Instruction for Galen College of Nursing. I'm also the co-chair of the OADN Simulation Committee. I'm excited to be here with you today. I've been involved in simulation since 2004, and I've actually been in academia since 2004. Prior to my academic career, I was a perioperative nurse for many years. But even before my nursing career, I had originally majored in computer science. And so my purpose in telling you that is because I am obviously the early adopter of the technology in our conversation today. I've always been drawn to technology, even early days before I was a nurse. And then as I launched my nursing career, I was drawn into perioperative nursing, which of course is very technologically driven. And then as soon as I entered academia, I was drawn to simulation as technology and as an early adopter. And now I'm excited to be joined today with my colleague Amber so that we can learn about the differences between an early adopter versus a little bit later adopter. Amber?
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Amber Wiedman, and I am the simulation manager for Galen College of Nursing on the Nashville campus in Nashville, Tennessee. My background includes at the bedside, I was an emergency department nurse for many years, but I transitioned into academics in 2022, so fairly new to the scene. One of my very biggest fears coming into academia is the technology that needed to happen in 2022 when I first got here. Of course, it's exploded since then. My master's is in education. In the last part of my master's, I focused on simulation, because I knew technology was a weak spot for me, and I wanted to know how to use it better to educate students and how to make the nursing profession better. So, like Janine said, I am typically that lagger when it comes to all technology. I typically am the skeptic that needs a little bit more proof before I get on board. However, once I do have that proof and I know that it can make education better and nursing better, I do get on.
Thank you both. So today, as we have our conversation between an early adopter and a lagger and how they nicely meet in the middle, we are excited to answer all of the questions and concerns that you might have. Please feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A. And as we have our live Q&A, as the webinar concludes, we will be able to address all of that information. So to kick things off, I want to go ahead and ask Janeen, and Amber, we can kick off to you after we have the answer as well. What do you feel when you first hear AI in nursing education?
I think that's a great question for us to start off with because I feel like this is true for any new technology that I've ever been exposed to. I definitely feel curiosity. Like the first emotion that surfaces for me around any new technology is curiosity, and I really am drawn to poking holes in it. Like I really want to jump in and find out what it's all about, to poke holes in it and to find out how far I can push the technology. Um, I feel like I approach every new technology as an opportunity to improve on what we already do. And so, for example, when I was an early adopter of simulation, and even before that, so backing up before I was in academia and I was in bedside practice, I was an early adopter of electronic medical records, which is kind of ironic in this day and age, because I could just see then, as I see now with AI, all of the opportunities for how this could make nursing more efficient. And so rather than hold back and wait to see what it might bring, I'm usually the first one to jump in and to test it and to push it to its limits. I feel like it's almost a challenge for me when a new technology surfaces to see what it can do for me. And in fact, as we'll have throughout this conversation, I have used platforms like ChatGPT so much so that I've experienced its limitations. And we did that early on, even when we were transitioning to an EMR, because early on, well, what would happen if there was a power outage or the computer system went down? We had to revert to paper charting. And so now, even with AI, I've tested it and poked it and pushed it far enough along in my daily use that there are some days that I'm just like, I don't even want to try with Chat GPT because I know that it's going to disappoint me. So, Amber, I'd love to hear your thoughts being on the other end of the adoption curve.
Yeah, absolutely. I do love this question because I think a lot of people, especially the skeptic laggers, have this question in the forefront when they think of AI inside of education. My first thoughts, it was a lot of overwhelming doubt, concern, maybe even a touch of fear. Although I do want to make the nursing profession better, I do want to make education better and academics better. When I first heard AI in education, my initial thought was, how am I going to teach my students to think if AI is going to do it for them? AI is going to take over and it's going to write papers for my students. It's going to take away the academia inside of academics. We no longer will have to think or to grow or develop as people because the computer is going to do it for my student or for myself. When AI started coming onto the scene, I related it back to when the iPhone came out. I was not the first person in line to get the iPhone. I still wanted a flip phone that could not connect to the internet. When I transitioned to a flip phone that could connect to the internet, I did not buy that package. And you accidentally clicked that internet button and it started spinning. You had to hurry up and hit end because it was just so terrifying to me that it could be right there in the palm of your hand. It could listen to me, it could hear me, it could read my thoughts. Those are my initial reactions, was the same things that I had with the iPhone. Now the iPhone is stuck in my hand. It's stuck in my hand. But my first thoughts were all the bad things that could happen. I now know that my iPhone can be used for bad or good. It depends on how I am using it. Um, and I choose to use it for good. So I started to go from fear to just doubtfulness. How is it actually going to work? I don't know how to use it yet. So how can I teach a student or a faculty member how to use it? So fear into doubt. And then I went from that doubting into a little bit of concern as well of, is this going to make me not as smart as I want to be? Is it constantly going to be thinking for me? Am I going to lose certain skills? Am my student not going to be able to gain the skill that I was able to get without AI? So those were my initial thoughts when I heard about AI in education.
Wonderful explanations, and it's very cool to see how your view, Amber, expanded, and Janeen, how yours continues to grow even as an early adopter. Just how, as early as you are, there's still something next for you to have to then become an early adopter of. So with that constant improvement, what makes you trust or even distrust a new tool when you're coming across it and deciding whether or not to incorporate it into what you are working with?
So that's a really interesting question for me because I don't know that I've ever actually pondered the trust of the technology. I feel like because of my background in technology, perhaps it's that it's my innate understanding of how technology works, that I am the driver of technology, and that I don't have similar concerns as what Amber has expressed, because I understand that technology will only do as much as you allow it to do or as much as you ask it to do. So, for example, in simulation, we have the landmark in CSBN study where they clarified that no more than 50% of clinical hours should be replaced by simulation. But even then, there are many caveats within that guideline. For example, that's only when the healthcare simulation standards of best practice are followed, or as the study says, high quality simulation. And of course, we measure quality by compliance with the standards. And so I feel like the same is true with AI. There's been a lot of negative publicity around AI. And so, as far as trusting or distrusting the technology, for me, it's all about how I use it. And so I have self-governance and self-agency to the point that I wouldn't use it for something that would be dangerous or damaging until I've tested all of those boundaries and parameters and know what the limits of the actual technology are.
Great. Janine, that's interesting that you're talking about the trust and how you're the driver. As the lagger, as the skeptic, when I first hear of AI in education, I very much so feel like a passenger. I don't feel like I'm driving the bus. I feel like I'm going to go where AI takes me, and that's part of my skepticism. As far as trusting it, what do I need to trust a little bit more? Is for the Janines of the world to do it first. For the Janines of the world to prove that it works, so the Janines of the world can show me this is what I did, and this is what made life better, nursing better, education better. Having the bugs worked out before I get my hands on it. Sometimes that is the trust that I need. Um, Published articles, that peer-reviewed articles of others who have done it before me. The evidence that it is working is what helps instill trust in me. I am the driver of my own discernment. I do understand that I have to take a look at what my concerns are and see are they valid or not. So when I'm reading those articles, when I'm learning from the early adopters of the world, it is very easy for myself to get that confirmation bias. I can read that article that says, aha, told you. My fear was confirmed. They are out there. They are. Going back to that cell phone reference earlier, I could use my cell phone to do bad things. I could do my cell phone to do illegal things. Same thing in the AI world. And I do have to have that discernment, and I do have to drive the bus, and I'm going to do more of that, Janine, to be able to say, yeah, you could find that confirmation bias where it proves your point of view, whichever side you are on. However, we are the humans in the situation, and I should be driving that bus. So just learning more about it and seeing what the early adopters have done before me.
Excellent. Thank you. And that's so interesting, Amber, to hear that you are now going to put yourself more in that position of driving, even as a laggard, because then I would be curious to hear from both of you how your initial, and it sounds like it could be changing, but how that adoption style works with your teams. You're both at Galen, so having that initial bus driver to a passenger that maybe takes over the wheel at some point, and how that goes into working with your colleagues. Janine, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Um, my adoption style, I would say, is innate with my leadership style. Like, I feel like they're very closely aligned. I tend to operate at a high frequency and at a fast pace, and that's true in my professional life as well as in my personal life. And so I sometimes I do feel like my energy has a tendency to overwhelm people. Although I will say that the caveat is that being an early adopter, high energy innovator does not necessarily equate to recklessness. So it is, I do proceed forward cautiously and judiciously. However, I will say that I am always the one who is excited to try something new. I like to try and fail fast. And so, for example, if we try something and it doesn't work, then I'm okay to retreat and regroup and try the next approach. I'm very much a leader who likes to inspire and develop my team members to try new things. And at Galen, we often like to say that innovation comes from anywhere, and I'm a firm believer of that. That some of our greatest ideas come from the most unexpected places. And so in terms of AI and adopting AI, I will say that just like with simulations, in as we've continued to expand simulation in the 20 years that I've been involved in it, the mantra of the simulation world has been you can't take patient care out of nursing education. And I continue to believe that. Like, we cannot educate students without having them practice care for live actual human beings. And we also can't take the human being out of simulation, meaning AI can only advance simulation to a certain point, but there's always going to be a need for human interaction and oversight to shore up and assure and protect those boundaries that Amber has discussed. What about you, Amber?
Um, I think my leadership style also aligns with how I would integrate it with my team and how that affects them. Um, if I can be that skeptic, that lagger who has learned from the early adopters and who has waded through my fears, my doubts, and my concerns before I can present it to my team or the people that I am leading, I think that instills more confidence in myself and maybe confidence from them into myself that my leader, my simulation manager has gone through what may be a concern that they may have. You're right. Here at Galen, we talk about innovation a lot, and we are constantly pushing for it. Can come from anywhere at any time from anybody. From several of our leaders, we hear that we want for us to happen to change instead of change just happening to us. We want to be the ones to initiate that. So if I can instill in the people that are following me or the people who are my simulation team, yes, these are your fears, your concerns, your initial doubts. However, I've waded through all of those as that lagger, and let me tell you what I learned from it. If I can transform my team to think for themselves and to be innovative and to say, yeah, I did have that concern. However, you have just dispelled that concern through your experience first. I think that could help them be a little bit more innovative and adopt AI a little bit faster than I did.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that leads nicely into my next question, because being the change that happens and then also keeping the human in simulation and keeping the care in nursing education, what impact do you think AI will have in simulation? Where do you think the largest impact will be, I suppose? So Amber, if you want to give us your insight on that, I think that would be wonderful.
Yes, the most exciting part for me is the speed or the time that it's going to save me. Scenario development is what I've used AI the most in so far, and the speed that that can happen in. Again, having that discernment and being that expert educator and that expert nurse, being able to still vet the what is being produced for me, but the speed at which it happens, I'm very excited about that. Although I am that skeptic and that lagger, I do want to be productive in my day-to-day activities and in my sim department. So knowing that there is something that is there to make my day a little bit more productive and to save me time so I can focus on other higher priorities.
So I agree with that, Amber. And in fact, that's part of the larger conversation around AI, not only in simulation, but in the nursing profession. And that is that it's our professional duty to make sure that AI is being used to free up our time so that we can practice more of the the art of nursing. And I think that that's true not only at the bedside and in patient care, but also in simulation and academia and in leadership in general. Like we just really need to be careful, for example, in practice, that AI isn't creating a situation where nursing loads can be increased because now they're more efficient. I feel like the same is true from a simulationist practice. We just need to be careful that we keep the human element very involved in the experience. And I know, and I'm not speaking for you, Amber, but part of the hesitation around adopting AI is because there is a fear that it will replace the nurse or that human element. But as I mentioned earlier, I have pushed Chat GPT and some of the other platforms to a point that I am fully confident that it has a lot of evolution to go before it will ever replace a human being, because um, it's not finessed enough to have that level of clinical judgment or critical judgment. We've heard horrible stories in the news about detrimental effects that it can have. And unfortunately, those are um, stories that remind us that it's not anywhere near taking our jobs or replacing human beings. There's a lot of automation involved in it, but in terms of actually the biggest impact that it will have in the immediate future in simulation, oh my gosh. So scenario design, as you've mentioned, Amber, but also just sort of new ways of thinking about simulation. So not only I need a scenario that will demonstrate heart failure or something like that, but what is the best way to teach students? My students are struggling with X, Y, and Z, and to just ask AI, how can I best teach that? And sometimes it comes up with things that as humans we've never thought of. I think it's more along the lines of sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. Sometimes just asking for another perspective from an AI product can offer oh, I never thought of using that particular technique. And sometimes it's not even simulation. Sometimes it's some other teaching modality that maybe we've forgotten over the years. So anyways, I think that to answer the question directly, AI will fundamentally change simulation and how how the practice operates.
It's all incredibly exciting. I've seen some of the simulation changes firsthand, and it is very cool to see for faculty and students alike. And so that taking me to my last question, or at least that we have for now, and of course, welcome to any closing words from either of you. Is there anything that would make you change your stance? It sounds like, Janeen, there isn't, but I'd be curious to hear if there is something as AI evolves and we get more into this agentic artificial intelligence, if there's anything that would make you go from being that early adopter, and then the same for you, Amber. But Janeen, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
So I think that I will always be an early adopter of most any technology. The only thing that I would not adopt early is anything that sort of raises a red flag for me. And even then, I will always be the first to raise my hand and volunteer to test it. And sort of like in direct opposition of what Amber has said, it's like I volunteer to test it, and if anything, like that's my way of protecting my team. I will get out there and test it first, and then once I've validated it's safe, then I'll hand it off to my team and others to try. Um, so that would really be the only time that I would lag on adopting any new technology is if my own internal sense is um, not only is it dangerous, but also if I don't understand the need. For example, going back to Amber's iPhone example, I was actually a very late adopter of the iPhone. I had shoot, what was the other one that other than iPhone? I had another model. Okay. I had another. We'll have to snip that this little
Sure.
section.
Android.
No, it wasn't even an Android.
Palm Pilot.
Palm Pilot, the one that had like the key.
Oh,
Candy.
BlackBerry.
Yes, Black. Okay, all right,
BlackBerry.
right.
Sure.
Take two. I was actually a very late adopter of the iPhone. I had a BlackBerry until they stopped making it, and I held on to the BlackBerry until it was no longer available, until the version I had died, because I didn't see the purpose of the iPhone when the BlackBerry worked just fine. So I'm not a bandwagoner. I'm an early adopter. And so that's another reason why I would not necessarily be an early adopter is if I don't see the need for the technology. So what about you, Amber?
I agree. And understanding the need behind it earlier, like I said, the most exciting part that I started using AI is that case scenario building because I had a need. I needed more time in the day. So that does make sense to me that if I understand the need, and if I can get my team to understand the need, maybe they can become early adopters as well. But the biggest thing for me is trusting the product. If it has been proven to work, if the early adopters have worked out the bugs before I came on board, that definitely helps me be a bandwagoner and not the early adopter. But lastly, if I can incorporate the things that I already know and I'm comfortable with into this new technology, I think that makes me feel a little bit better about it. You mentioned earlier best practices inside of simulation. I'm very well aware. I practice them all day, every day. So if I have guidance and if I can incorporate what I already know and I'm comfortable with and I do every single day with a little bit of something new, such as AI and simulation, that could help me feel more confident in the product and give to my team.
Thank you both. This has been incredible. The conversation, the insights. Nursing education obviously benefits from having both those early adopters and those that might pump the brakes a little bit more and be those quote unquote laggards. Although I wouldn't call you a laggard since you're already using and diving headfirst and taking over driving that bus. But it's what makes the nursing education world go around, right? Having both perspectives and being able to collaborate and communicate with one another for that information. So we would love to encourage our audience to think about where you fall on that spectrum of early adoption and laggard, perhaps somewhere in the middle. And as we jump over to our Q&A session, we're hoping that we can answer any other questions or concerns or hear some feedback and stories from your own experiences, either adopting artificial intelligence or some other form of technology early or being a bit later and how that worked for you. So thank you both to Amber and Janeen, and we will go ahead and start opening up for questions. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today as we went through our conversation with Janeen and Amber. Unfortunately, Janeen is unable to join us for our Q&A session due to a scheduling conflict. So I will do my best to act as proxy. And of course, we have Amber, who is already diving into answering some of these questions, and what a list of fantastic questions we have. So I am going to just go ahead and kick off right now asking Amber one off the bat. And these are not in any particular order, just trying to make the flow go. But I'm thinking, Amber, based on your conversation about being a bit of a laggard or skeptic, what are some low barrier ways for nurse educators to begin using AI in their courses?
Yeah, great question. Because I was that skeptic, because I was that lagger, I needed the proof that what I was doing was safe. So when I first started using AI, I did it in a way that was no consequence if things went bad. Didn't even have anything to do with students or my courses that I was teaching at the time. I would ask I would ask AI, this is what's in my fridge. What can I make for dinner? Something so no consequence if it goes poorly, right? I needed to test the waters just a little bit. And then when I started asking questions specific to work and specific to students in my courses, I would only ask questions that I already knew the answers to, that I could validate where the answers were coming from and that it was correct. Again, in case things went sideways, because I was looking for it to go sideways. So I would first start out with things that didn't have any consequence. Then I would dip my toes into things that I knew the answers to. Next, I would move into the realm of, I don't know the answer to this yet, and I'm looking to brainstorm. I'm looking for new information. And once I got that information from AI, I had to find that information myself, again, to prove that what I got was correct. What I got was correct from AI. So that's how I started to dip my toes into it in things that did not have any consequence, and then got a little bit further each time.
That's incredibly helpful. Thank you. And I think that goes well into one of the questions about which safeguards should be in place to prevent misuse or over-reliance on AI by students. And I know at Galen, your AI policy is very much tied to your integrity. So at a nursing education and simulation, there is so much focus on students making sure that they're acting with the patient care and best interest and being ethical and integral. So having those safeguards that you're already focused on as a nursing program to help guide the students of, hey, this is a great tool, but this is not something that's going to replace what you're already doing. You still need to be doing X, Y, and Z. So would you agree with that those safeguards kind of flow from what you as nurse educators and simulationists are already trying to help instill in the students?
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, I always relate back to the iPhone because I had a lot of the same feelings and concerns and fears. When we were in clinicals, when iPhones just started coming, we swept it under the rug. We said, keep it turned off, leave it in your car. Who leaves their phone in their car? Nobody, right? We thought if we ignored it long enough, students would just leave it in the car. But then students were using their phones inappropriately in the clinical setting. And we quickly learned, oh, I have to set the example as the educator. I have to teach them how to properly use this technology for the good of patient care, right? So then instead of sweeping it under the rug and trying to ignore it and keeping it into the car, there are plenty of published articles. There are plenty of webinars out there. There are training sessions that we go to as educators to teach our students how, when, and where to use a cell phone in a hospital setting to keep that patient safe and to keep them safe. So the same thing inside of AI. I have to teach that student how to use it. It's not going away. It is here to stay, and it is here to make our lives better if we use it correctly. So how do I teach my student how to do it? Well, I first have to know how to do that. I need to know that the safeguards, what is appropriate, what is not. Galen does have a policy for AI usage. We do know that there are certain things that are inappropriate to do. Using generative AI to create an entire paper and you put your name on it, that's cheating, right? That's plagiarism on a different level, right? But we do have safeguards inside of our student catalog. It is open to the public to be able to look at those. I did put a link inside of one of the Q&A answers if anyone wants to look at that. But it gives guidelines and barriers to what can a student put inside of chat. What should a student use AI for? What should they not use AI for?
That is wonderful. It answers quite a few of the other questions that we had too. That was addressed with student access and how you are guiding them by teaching, by showing, by doing, and then having them follow your example. And another question that we had is, are there AI tools that support students with different learning styles or needs? So if you have any examples or experience with actually trying to make that more personalized learning, I think our audience would love to hear some of that feedback.
Yes, we have not disseminated anything inside of my college just yet, but I am a part of a work group where we are looking at English as a second language student and the barriers that they encounter. We know that in America, you do have to pass the NCLEX in an English version. And that having an accommodation to take that in a second language is not an appropriate accommodation. So my work group is currently working to say, what can we use in the AI world to help my English as a second language student bridge that barrier between English and whatever their first language is? How can I bridge the barrier to help them learn English while I am teaching them the nursing content they need to know? I'll tell you some of the things that we're looking at. If my student is able to read in their first language and hear it in the second language at the same time, there has been quite a few studies that show how that can bridge that content and help that student. So that's one thing that we are looking at. Inside of our learning management system, we do have readback settings. We do have things where I could type in one language but read it in a separate language. So we are looking at those models inside of our learning management system.
That's incredible. And I know we touched on it briefly in the discussion that this technology is growing exponentially. So things are changing quickly. So these work groups and test groups are fantastic because it helps you as the educator understand before introducing it to the student, but also gives you that insight as to where things are going, which I think is going to happen rapidly. And students, as always, will be ahead of it because they are on the cutting edge of technology. But then that leads into what are some ways that you're able to make sure students are incorporating and understanding that evidence-based concept with using AI and discerning between, hey, this might be a hallucinating link and this is actually something that's reliable.
Yeah. We are already doing this as educators in every other part of nursing. It has to be evidence-based. The risk versus benefit has to be weighed no matter what we are doing in that patient care setting. Same thing in the education world. So it is the exact same things that we're already doing, showing the evidence, going out there and finding, since it is so new, finding the evidence, reading those publications, attending those webinars, attending those training sessions, to learn what is working and what is not working.
And that leads into, this is a combination question, but if you're looking for a new product, is AI functionality something that's required? Because as we're discussing, you're saying how evidence-based and making sure that students are following that. But then also, so if it is a must that you have AI, how are you finding the technology that you're using meeting expectations from what a vendor or the person administrator that's handling it, what they're telling you it will do versus what it's doing? And I guess how do you kind of balance the two?
Yeah, I love this question as well. I do not endorse a specific product here on this platform as of yet, but several that I have used that have met the expectations. One that is college-wide, where I currently am, is the Jane assessments. It is an AI-powered assessment that our senior students use at the very end of our courses. It gives them tailored scenarios, kind of like simulation-based scenarios, and it's a question-answer assessment where in the past, this would take hours for me as an educator to sit down and grade and then create a study plan for my student based off of the benchmarks that they met or did not meet. Inside of this AI-powered Jane assessment is what it is called. It makes it for me. It checks off, does my student meet that benchmark or are they lagging behind in that benchmark? And then it creates a tailored plan for this student. Whereas previously, I would have to meet with each student an hour at a time to say, this is what you've missed and the content that you need to focus on. With this AI-powered tool, it makes that study plan for me. And within it, it also assigns certain things for the students to help bridge the gaps where they are falling short. So is it a must? As the skeptic lagger that does use it almost on a daily basis now, I don't know if it's a must right now, but I think we are very close to it being a must.
I think we're very close to it being almost a built-in at this point. I believe we were discussing earlier with my colleagues, and now the newest iPhone just has generative AI built into it. So I think we're getting close to it's just going to be part, and then you have to decide, is this something that we want to use, or is it something like how my calculator on my phone is not always the best, but it's something that's there. And that transitions well into this question, which I think is so important and interesting about reconciling nursing goals of sustainability and the impact of AI on water usage and the environment and how that impacts your thoughts about AI. And I know personally, this is something I think of frequently. And as cliche as it might sound, going back into that integrity and helping students understand that you do need to be very specific as to why you're using AI, because just using it to write a paper that you shouldn't be using it for anyway is not exactly an ethical use of AI for the environment or for your program. And so, Amber, I'm not sure if that has come up at all with as you're discussing these work groups that you're in and these test groups and where we're going from there.
It has definitely come up. And as a simulation manager on our campus, technology in general, the dolls that we use, the technology behind that, are we as green as we can be? I can't say yes or no just yet. The jury is still out on that. I will say that there needs to be a lot more research in the sustainability and the greenability of AI in the future. I would recommend, just as a personal note, just like anything else in education and in nursing, that risk versus benefit needs to be weighed on both sides every single time. So I would suggest that there does need to be a little bit more research inside of that realm.
Absolutely. And I think that's an area that as organizations are putting together their policies and best practices, that can be something that is at the back of your minds as well. And I know we are coming up on time here, so I do just want to pose if anyone has any last questions, but I'm also going to have one for Amber directly that is after this, we'll call it workshop of the conversation. And as you're preparing to present at your poster at the OADN convention in November, so you've been spending a lot of time on this. Is there anything that you would like to say to our audience that is going to help them as they focus on either continuing to be at that forefront of early adoption or maybe lagging a bit, and where you can kind of meet in the middle and suggestions, recommendations you might have?
Yeah. My personal suggestions are, it is okay wherever you are on the spectrum of the early adopter to the skeptic lagger. It does not matter where you are on that spectrum just yet. It is okay to have whatever feeling you have about AI. And I would say lean into whatever that fear, that doubt, that excitement, that oh, I'm just looking forward to the future, which whatever you are feeling, lean into that some more. Okay. Learn as much as you possibly can about the topic. dive into it. Again, starting with the things that have no consequences and then moving up into the heavier content. As Ms. Janeen mentioned in the first part of our webinar, she has been to the edges of AI and that there are limitations, which is so comforting to hear as that lagger. And as the lagger, I've also been to the limitations as well. So I've seen that it is not going to take over my day-to-day lives in a bad way. So my last final thoughts are lean into whatever section you are on that spectrum, and learn as much as you possibly can.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Amber. I saw one more question come in about assessing student use of AI, and I do apologize if we were not able to get to everyone's questions. We will be sending out a recording of this webinar, and I will also keep a list of the questions that we were unable to get to so that I can share those with both Janeen and Amber, and that we can get back to you as well with those answers. But one other point I saw in the comments was about things like Turnitin and whatnot. So assessing students is still not something that's great with AI because the AI does not necessarily want to work against itself. And I think, Amber, we've had this conversation before where it does come down to, and I always use this example, it's like Cliff Notes. You're not going to pass the essay exam if you just read the Cliff Notes. You're not going to do well in the course if you just rely on AI. And Amber, I think your perspective of being a laggard and then just it not mattering where you are, it helps you kind of discern that a bit more. So if you just want to, like, we have about 2 more minutes, you can close out that. And again, thank you everyone for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. We have several pieces like Turnitin and things like that. That is also AI powered and it's not trying to work against itself. I will give a very clear example of this. A couple of weeks ago, I had a colleague reach out to me and sent me something a student had turned in. And she said, "Hey, will you look at this? I can't quite put my finger on it, but I don't think the student wrote this. What are your thoughts?" And within just glancing at it without even reading the content, I knew that it was AI generated. And so I met with this faculty member and I pointed out those nuances, that when you live in AI for as long as we have, you start to recognize those things again before you even read the content. There are telltale signs, even down to which platform of AI were they using. So again, that goes back to just learning as much as you possibly can about the systems and how to use it. And you're right, the Turnitins of the world, those are all AI generated as well. So having that discernment still as a human, we cannot take the human element out of anything that we're doing.
AI is not coming for our jobs. Nurse educators are absolutely needed, and those students need you to be that human intervention for them as well. And I know we could go on and on this conversation and topic. So hopefully anyone that is attending the OADN convention will be able to stop by and see your poster and chat with you a bit further. And please keep an eye out for an additional email about a follow-up webinar continuing on this line of conversation. So thank you again, and we hope that everyone has a fantastic day.
Thank you.